Welcome to Reflections, Monday's short-form studio feature ahead of Friday's Photo Walk podcast. Thoughtful observations on creativity and, well, just life really. You'll find all 5 of this week's reflections on our Patreon channel, The Extra Mile. Expertise. Has technical expertise overshadowed good old-fashioned feelings for the craft of photography? A question I shall revisit after some thoughts about football. Now, fear not, this is not going to be a reflection using the popular sport of football from which to talk about the subject of expertise for the whole piece. But there's a fair amount. When I talk about football, I am referencing the round ball version most of the world considers as football. Substitute soccer if you really must at this stage. In my day, as a fledgling with a full head of hair, football, as I remember it, was not a very technical sport. Even Jimmy Hill on the Saturday night TV footy show, Match of the Day, would use language like boot the ball up the field a little more in his punditry. I'm sure of that. As a young something, I was a defender for Bengio Tigers. We played in gold and black stripes, in the days before McDonald's started sponsoring youth football. I've never quite understood that stance. Look, I like a Big Mac with the best of them. But there's something quite odd about a fast food chain sponsoring sport and health. And if you dare say to me, "Carrots, Neil, what about the carrot sticks, Neil?" I shall stare at you long and hard for longer than feels comfortable. Some associations just don't feel appropriate. To me. True story, actually. My grandfather was a tobacconist and confectioner close-ish to Tottenham Hotspur's ground in North London. And there was a time in the 70s he'd be the go-to blending tobacconist, I think they'd call it, for the Spurs players who'd buy their tobacco on their way into the match. See, some associations just don't feel appropriate. To me. Anyway, back on point, the manager of the under-13s team I played for, Bengio Tigers, was from memory certainly not very technical. Or actually, not technical in the slightest. I don't recall half-time chats with pitch-side marker boards or anyone shouting tactics from the sidelines. It was as much as the coaching staff with a very small S could do to stop us running off early approaching half-time when the orange segments arrived from my friend Christopher Strong's mum. I'm having to borrow from somewhat faded memory here, but coaching followed a more colloquial path. Something like, "Oi, Jamesy, just bang the ball out if it comes anywhere near you, because you're certainly not skilled enough to do anything with it. Big Trev, you run on, see if you can get on the end of anything that comes your way." The irony being Big Trev was actually little Trevor Higgins from my chemistry class at school, someone whose growth spurt hadn't actually triggered yet, but he was the fastest kid on the sport field, no doubt. "And the rest of you, when that whistle blows, knock it down a pitch, see if you can get just 2 or 3 completed passes. Then when you lot have lost it, Jamesy can, well, kick it out, hopefully." When we watch football at home, my eldest speaks in a language akin to Hungarian with a Basque accent in Icelandic. "Come on, Dad, get with it. It's obvious. They've shifted into a 3-2-4-1 with the fullbacks inverting to create overloads in the half spaces. You can see that while the false 9 drops into the double pivot to destabilise the opposition's press." Right you are, son. Or in old money, bang it up the fields, lads, and run like shit to get on the end of it if Big Trev doesn't get there first. So yes, football these days has turned into a right old tech fest. To put it in photographic terms, it's like being handed a Sony flagship mirrorless and actually knowing what every single button, dial and menu item does. Impressively technical. But has technical expertise overshadowed good old-fashioned feelings? Feelings for the craft of photography? I do wonder if we've confused expertise with expression. I mean, yeah, they both start with an E, but they're about as relatable to each other as tobacco should be to a Spurs player heading into a match. The danger with expertise is that it can become a cage, a set of rules so tightly drawn that you dare not colour outside the lines. You know your histogram better than you know your own heartbeat. You recite lens specs more fluently than you recall why you first actually picked that camera up. And yet, when you look at the work of some of the most celebrated photographers, Robert Frank, Nan Goldin, William Eggleston, it isn't always the technical perfection that holds you. What strikes you is presence and honesty and timing, eyes open stuff, willing to see. I think back to the pictures that really stop me, the ones where perhaps the focus is slightly off or the light didn't follow a textbook pattern. They work or worked because they felt alive when I made them. Expertise didn't make them, attentiveness did, and a bit of luck. So, is expertise overrated? Well, I'd say it depends on what you're measuring. Technical prowess is useful, yes, it gives you tools and choices and control, but it's not the heart of the matter. A carpenter who knows every type of joint but never builds a chair isn't much use to anyone. I'm sure my granddad used to say something like that, in between selling tobacco to Spurs players. The craft exists to serve the making, not the other way around. And after 20 years of professional photography, do I consider myself an expert? Honestly, no. And I'm not sure I'd want to. Far too much pressure. Because if you start to believe you've totally arrived, you stop travelling. You stop questioning, you stop experimenting, you stop failing and learning. And I don't think that's an excuse for my inability to quote tech, no. Perhaps the better word is practitioner, someone in practice, still on the pitch, still trying to get a few passes together. I told you there'd be more football. Someone who loves the game, whether or not they can name every formation or decode the tactics. And that's a comforting thought, I think, to keep showing up, to keep photographing. Not as an expert, but as a participant. Someone willing to kick the ball, who may miss, but tries again. Perhaps the most interesting pictures aren't made by those who know everything, but by those who are still curious enough to admit we don't. Halftime oranges, anyone? See Christopher Strong's mum.